You'll have to forgive me for the incredibly boring background we've got going on today. I am in the midst of adjusting my office a little bit, and I haven't decided yet what's going to go on this wall behind me, but I've like moved my desk around so I don't have my shelves behind me anymore. But that doesn't really matter because today we're here to talk about some anticipated releases. We are headed into quarter two of the year. It's somehow March already, and that kind of blows my mind. We just had spring forward, which I hate, so I am very tired, but that means we're also kind of looking at what's coming out in the next 3 months: April, May, June. Those things are coming up very quickly, and we have quite a few books to talk about today, so we're just going to go ahead and get right into it. Diving straight in, we're starting out on April 7th, and first things first, we're getting How to Build a Haunted House by Caitlin Blackwell Baines. This is, I think, one of the only nonfiction on this list, but it's about haunted houses across art and media, and kind of why we keep coming back to that idea. So that really appeals to me because I love a haunted house story. I'm really curious to see what that like the sort of thesis of this book is going to be, but it sounds like it's going to be really interesting exploration of like famous haunted houses. And then we're getting The Ending Rites Itself by Evelyn Clark. This is a writing duo that's actually Kat Clark and V.E. Schwab. So I'm a little more hesitant about this one than I was when I added it to the list, only because I'm not a huge fan of V.E. Schwab's writing. But the premise sounds cool. It's about a bunch of authors who were brought to the secluded estate of a recently deceased, like, famous author who failed to finish their last manuscript before they passed away. And the publisher is giving all of these authors, these 6 authors, a chance to find the manuscript within 72 hours, and whoever finds it gets to finish out the last chapter and have their own career kickstarted. So it sounds like it's going to be really tense, and there's probably going to be some murder involved, but it sounds like it could be really fun. I'm just going to wait and see what people think of this one when it comes out, just because I don't totally love V.E. Schwab's writing, and I'm a little more hesitant than I initially was to pick this one up, like, right out the gate. Then we're getting This Little Art of Folding Space by John Chu, and this one, I don't know the exact premise. This is one I cannot describe to you, because I read the description multiple times and I still don't quite understand what's going on. But what I did catch is that there's a family involved, and the mother of the family is dying, and there is some sort of device that is impacting space-time that is tying her life to space-time. And so dimensions are like, or the reality is like collapsing in some way because of this device, and like as long as she's alive, reality is slowly being destroyed. I don't really know much more than that, but it sounds really interesting, and I really love the cover for this one because it's just a beautiful piece of art. Then we're also getting Shy Girl by Mia Ballard, which I think is just sort of a good for her revenge type story about a woman who meets this guy on a dating app who basically is hiring her to be his dog during the day, but he ends up not keeping his side of the bargain, and she goes on some sort of revenge quest. It sounds super weird, but it sounds like it could be really thought-provoking, so I definitely want to give that one a try when it comes out. Then on the 14th, we're getting Wife-Shaped Bodies by Laura Cranehill. This one I think is a sort of a dystopian, not a fully dystopian, maybe more like fantasy horror, but it's about a woman who lives in a town where all of the wives have these like mushroom growths on them, and she eventually gets married and is grappling with the changes to her own body as a result of that, but then meets another wife who has a rebellious tendencies and starts making her question kind of, their reality and question their role in the world. So it sounds like it's going to be really hard hitting. I think it's queer. And I love anything mushroom horror, so I'm excited to give this one a try. Then we're getting The Killing Spell by Shay Kawe, and that one is a fantasy where language is tied to magic, or like language is magic, and there's a young Hawaiian woman who has to solve a murder in order to clear her own name within that context. So that sounds really interesting. And then we're getting The Faith of Beasts by James S. A. Corey, which I think is the second book in their, was it the Captives War series? I've been hearing good things about it, so second book of that is coming out. And then we're also getting Morsel by Carter Keene. This one I have an arc for, and I'm pretty excited to get to it. This is like folk horror set in the Appalachian Mountains, and it's about generational trauma. It's following a young woman who takes up this job. She's trying to kind of pull herself up by her bootstraps, and she takes this job that leaves her stranded in the Appalachian Mountains, and she realizes that she is being stalked by something and has to figure out how to get out of the forest alive. Then on April 21st, we're apparently hit 2 keys at once. On April 21st, reading The Language of Liars by S.L. Huang, which is another one I don't think I could totally explain, but it sounds to be about a young man who is raised to be a spy with this, like, group of aliens. His civilization is kind of diminishing, and the aliens that they're wanting to like, infiltrate are the ones who have access to the material required for, like, light speed travel. And so this young man has been raised to try and like infiltrate their society and learn about their technology, but he's really like obsessed with their culture and their technology. Like he wants to be one of them. He doesn't just want to pretend to be one of them. He wants to be one of them. But it seems like in trying to infiltrate them, he's also kind of destroying their civilization. So I don't know exactly what that means, but I'm curious to find out. Then we get The Caretaker by Marcus Klewer, and this is probably one of my most anticipated books of the year. I absolutely loved We Used to Live Here, and it sounds like this is going to be a similar, like, creepy house story. This one following a young woman who takes up a job as a caretaker for a home on the Oregon coast. It's supposed to be a 3-day job with good pay, but when she gets there, it turns out that being a caretaker for this house involved a lot more than she was expecting, and now she has to try and survive her 3-day stint as the caretaker for the home. So that sounds really cool, and I have an arc for this one as well, and I'm very excited to get to it. Then we're getting Burn the Sea by Mona Tawari, which is a fictionalized reimagining of actual attacks by the Portuguese on southern India in the 1500s, I believe. And I believe that the main character is like a reimagining of an actual queen. So I'm really curious to see what that one's going to be like. It sounds like it's going to be like very anti-colonial. And I think the tagline was something like she has to face her people's greatest enemy once and for all. So it sounds like it's going to be very like tense and epic. And I think it sounds like it's going to be really cool. Then we're also getting Odessa by Gabrielle Scher. This one I think is horror or maybe sort of literary, and it was giving me Monstrelia vibes when I was reading the description. I can't remember the exact plot, but this is Russia during the pogroms and following a family who like resurrect somebody within the family who's died. And then there's some sort of beast stalking the villagers. That's all I've got. I don't really know what to expect from that one, but it was just kind of reminding me a little bit of Monstrelia when I was reading the description. Then we're getting Japanese Gothic by Kylie Lee Baker, and this is sort of a colliding timeline story about a young man who commits a murder and then flees to his father's new home in Japan, and then encounters a samurai from like 200 years ago who is got some similar secrets going on. So I'm not really sure where that's going to go, but it sounded like it could be pretty cool. And then we're getting Thrall by Rebecca Mahoney. And this one I think is a Dracula reimagining set at a modern day university where a young woman is attacked by a vampire and ends up teaming up with his other victims to try and take him down. So that sounds like it could be really fun. Then on the 28th, we're getting Molka by Monica Kim. This one is a women's revenge story about hidden cameras following a young woman who has a big part of her life ruined by footage from a hidden camera being released, kind of ruins her relationship, and she obviously is quite angry about that situation. And then I believe she is also being stalked by a guy that she works with who is one of the people who's setting the hidden cameras, and so she is on some sort of revenge quest to make whoever has ruined her life pay. And it sounds like it's going to be really gory and probably really insightful. So I'm really excited to give that one a try. And then Our Rogue Fates by Sarah Glenn Marsh. This is a sort of D&D quest style fantasy romance, queer fantasy romance, and I think it sounds like super fun. And I've previously read, I think it's The Girls Are Never Gone by the same author, and that was a really fun like YA thriller. So I really want to give this one a try just because it sounds like it's going to be like kind of questy, magic-y fun. Then we're getting on May 5th, The Last Contract of Asako by Fonda Lee, which is like corporate samurais in space. I don't need to know anything more than that. That just sounds incredible, and I really like Fonda Lee's writing, so I'm excited for this one. And then we're getting Along and Speaking Silence, yet another highly anticipated release for me, which is the 7th book in the... what is it called? I always forget the title. The Singing Hills cycle. It's the 7th Singing Hills cycle book, and I believe this one is following Chi in the sort of early days of their time as a cleric. And they are in a town where the town is like getting ready to celebrate a festival, and then a bunch of refugees show up from another place, and so it's about all of the stories around that arrival and the stories that the people arriving in this town are bringing with them of their homeland. So I think that sounds like it's going to be really hard-hitting, and I just love this series so much. Then we get Color Unknown by Gillian McAllister. This description was reminding me a little bit of a book I haven't read, but I've heard the description a number of times, which is The Chain by, is it Adrian McKinty? Is that the author's name? I can't remember the author's name exactly, but this is about a woman whose daughter is kidnapped when she's on a family vacation, and she ends up getting a ransom note that's like, or a call, not a note, but like a ransom call that's like, show up alone, don't involve the police, and she decides to go, and rather than money, what they want is for her to do something, and it sounds like she's going to be asked to do something like pretty horrific to get her daughter back. And then we get Platform Decay by Martha Wells. We're getting a lot of books this day. Another really highly anticipated release for me, though. This is book number 8 in the Murderbot Diaries, and this is one of my favorite series, so I don't even care what the plot is. I am just very excited to pick this one up. Then we're getting I Know a Place by Nat Cassidy, which I believe is a short story collection. Then there's also Enormous Wings, which for some reason is a title I have trouble saying, by Laurie Frankel. I have tried a previous book from this author called Family Family, and I really liked the writing in it. I just didn't manage to finish that one. But this one is about, like, bodily autonomy, it sounds like. It's about an older woman, like, in her 70s who goes to this retirement community, and she starts to really rebuild her life there. It's a big change for her, except then she turns out to be pregnant at 77, I think, and it's all about all the different people who have some sort of stake in this or some interest in this phenomena and how it impacts her life and her autonomy. So it sounds like it's probably going to be kind of a tough read and probably pretty hard hitting, but I do remember really enjoying this author's writing. And finally on this day we're getting Accumulation by Amy Pakwatka, which is a like haunted house story about a filmmaker who she and her family move into this house and things slowly start to go wrong, and it sounds like there's going to be some like loops of some kind. I don't know if they're going to be time loops exactly, but like looping actions that become more and more sinister. So I think that seems like it's going to be an interesting take on a haunted house story. Then on May 12th, we're getting Radiant Star by Ann Leckie, which I think is a standalone spinoff from the Ancillary Justice series in that universe. I don't remember the plot premise of this one, but I know Ann Leckie is pretty popular, and the previous standalone she wrote sounded really cool also. So I just want to put this one out there in case you're interested in this particular sci-fi universe. And then May 19, we're getting In Side by Side They Wander by Molly Tanzer, and this one is a intergalactic art heist. And I don't need to know anymore. That just sounds cool. And then we're getting Behind Five Willows by June Hur, which is, I think, the first of her books that isn't specifically a mystery. It's a historical fiction set in Korea, and I think it's actually a romance. It said something about like an homage to Jane Austen, so I'm very excited to give that a try. I believe it's also set against the backdrop of government-mandated book banning, and it's about a reader and a writer who sort of find each other and start working together to oppose the government's actions, but also kind of find love along the way. Then there's The Tapestry of Fate by Shannon Chakraborty, which I believe is the second book in the Amina al-Sarafi series. So this is just here because I know a lot of people really enjoyed book 1. I still need to read book 1. I want to try and get to it before the sequel comes out in May, but we'll see if I actually manage that because I often have ambitious aspirations. But definitely wanted to put this one out here because I know a lot of people really like the first book. And then finally on May 19th, we're getting Mordaunt's Peril by R.J. Barker, which is a fantasy murder mystery thing. That seems to be kind of generally what he does. But this one is following a guy who is a cleric of death, and it sounds like he's able to hear the last thoughts of the dead. But he's also really unpopular with his coworkers, and so kind of in that context, he ends up having to solve a murder mystery, probably to save himself. Then on May 26th, we're getting The Final Target by Nora Roberts. I normally wouldn't pay any attention to Nora Roberts, but I've been following Books Like Woe for several years now, and I know she's working on a Reading Roberts project, so happened to see this one and thought it sounded interesting. It's a thriller about an author who is being stalked by a fan, and I think she ends up moving cross-country to restart her life to try and get away from that, but maybe that move doesn't work quite as well as she thought. So that sounds like it's going to be really intense, and I think Nora Roberts also often does a romantic element in her thrillers, which I'm finding is a thing that I enjoy. So thinking about giving this one a try. And then Bone of My Bone by Joanna Van Veen sounds very intense. I believe it's a fantasy, and it's about these two people. I think one of them's a nun, and the other one, I can't remember what their role is, but the two of them are fleeing a city that has been ransacked, and they find the gilded skull of a saint in the forest. And if there's a legend that if you reunite the skull with the body of the saint, you'll get a wish granted. But they're taking that skull and running with it, trying to get this wish granted, to try and get some security. But they're being chased by someone who doesn't want them to succeed, and also there may be a greater cost than they're expecting to like fulfilling that wish. So I think that sounds super interesting, and sounds like it's gonna be like a really creepy quest story. And I've heard good things about this author's previous books. Then on June 2nd, we're getting Sublimation by Isabel J. Kim, which sounds like it's a literary speculative fiction thing about immigration. This is set in a world where when you immigrate, a version of you goes on to the place you're immigrating to, and a version of you stays behind and lives your life in the place that you're originally from. And so this one is following a young woman who is called home for a funeral, and her other self is trying to take over her body. That sounds really weird and really creepy, and I want to give it a try. And then we're also getting Land by Maggie O'Farrell, and this one is about a guy and his son who are like involved in surveying and mapping Ireland, and then something goes wrong on that, and the son is having to like navigate how is he going to help his father like get back home. Don't know much more beyond that, and I've never read anything from Maggie O'Farrell, but I definitely think her work leans a little on the literary side, so it seems like it could be sort of speculative, or it might not be speculative at all, and I'm not really sure what to expect there. Then on June 9th, we're getting A Trade of Blood. This is one of my other really anticipated releases. I am keeping my fingers crossed I managed to get an arc of this one because I got arcs for the first two. This is the third book in the Anna and Din mystery series, and I just love these so much. They're so good. These are some of my favorite fantasy murder mysteries, and this particular one, Anna and Din are having to prove someone's innocence to try and stop a civil war, which sounds like very tense, very political, and I really have been enjoying the ways that as the series progresses, we're learning more and more about the empire that they live in and the way that the politics work there, and Anna and Din are having to like get into these more and more difficult political situations. So I'm really enjoying the way that series is progressing, and I'm very excited for this third book. And then June 23rd, we're getting Summer Slasher by E.L. Chen. This one I think is supposed to be an homage to like 80s slashers, but also kind of like poking at those tropes. And it says something in the tagline about like sometimes, or like the real horror is not being able to escape who you were in high school. So I'm curious to see what that means like in practice in the book. And it also just sounds like it's going to be a good slasher time. And then finally, June 30th, we're getting The Winged Game by Sophie Kim, which I'm very excited for as well. This is another one I have an arc for. And this one is it's a fantasy romance surrounding a fictional sport called Carrie Witchet that is like rugby but played on the backs of winged beasts. And in this particular book, there are two people from rival teams who end up having to work together. They get pulled together by some sort of contract that, one, means that they have to fake date. I'm not usually a big fake dating fan, but we'll see how it goes with this one because I loved the author's previous duology. And they also have to work together to solve a mystery because the beasts are becoming ill with some sort of like mysterious, creepy illness. And I think that sounds like it's going to be fun. And I love a good mystery aspect, so I'm hopeful that this book will work just as well for me as the two Fates Thread books did. And then finally, we're getting Dead But Dreaming of Electric Sheep by Paul Tremblay, which is about a former professional gamer or semi-professional gamer who is tasked with remotely driving a man who's in a vegetative state but has like proprietary AI technology in his brain from the West Coast to the East Coast. And that just sounds like a wild premise, and I'm curious to see where that's gonna go. So those are all the books that I'm aware of that are coming out in the next 3 months from April to June. Please let me know down in the comments if there's something that I missed that you think should be on my list, because I'm always interested to see what else is coming out that I haven't heard of yet. But let me know in the comments below what you're most excited about that comes out in the next couple of months. I always love hearing about that. So yeah, that's all I've got for you today. I really hope you've enjoyed this video, and if you have, I hope you consider giving it a like, maybe even subscribing to see what comes next. I'm currently posting at least once a week, and I hope to see you in the next video.